This is Precalculus Concept 32b. We're now going to look at the half angle formulas. And once again, we've got 3 new formulas to add to your toolkit sheet. This time these are all half angle formulas. So the sine of alpha over 2 is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine alpha over 2. The cosine of alpha over 2 plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine alpha over 2. And finally, the tangent of alpha over 2 is plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine alpha over 1 plus cosine alpha. By the way, alpha is the angle in this problem. It could easily be theta, it could easily be x, so don't worry about mixing and matching different angles there. I was just following what the book gave us as our angle. Another side note here, the plus or minus, unlike what you've seen before, does not mean 2 different answers, but it's rather a plus or minus. And that's something you're going to have to decide depending on what quadrant the angle in question lies in. So there'll be certain cases where the alpha over 2 angle will be in the first or second quadrant, right, or the third quadrant, and then depending on that quadrant, you're either going to attach a plus or a minus. But that's part of answering these questions, is thinking about where your final answer lies. All right, let's look at an example. We're going to use these half angle formulas to find some values of angles that are half of a familiar angle. So let's start off with sine of 105. Right? So sine of 105, if we think about our unit circle, is really just half of 210. And while you may not be familiar with 105, hopefully you're pretty familiar with 210. All right, so here's my answer. It's going to be plus or minus. We'll come back and make that decision at the end. 1 minus the cosine of 210 divided by 2. Right? Cosine of 210 is a unit circle value. You may have forgotten, but you can look that up. Think about it a little bit, but it turns out to be negative square root of 3 over 2. And I'm going to have that. And then plus or minus the square root of 1 plus the square root of 3 over 2, all over 2. There's a little bit of simplification we can do here. If I multiply by 2 over 2 inside the radical, that gets rid of kind of my little mini fraction here. So your final answer here is going to be the square root of 2 plus the square root of 3 all over 4. And the final thing in this problem is to think about the quadrant in which our original angle, in this case 105, lies. And since that's in the second quadrant, the sign should be a plus. So we're going to put a plus there for that one. All right, let's try the second one. We'll go a little faster. We want to think of cosine of 105 as the cosine of 210 over 2. And we have a slightly different formula for this one. It's plus or minus the square root of 1 plus cosine of 210 all over 2. That's going to be plus or minus the square root of 1 plus negative root 3 over 2 all over 2. And that ends up being plus or minus the square root of 1 minus root 3 all over 2, and square root of 2 minus root 3 all over 4. In this case, 105 is in the second quadrant, so I want my answer to be negative, so that's your final answer. Okay, and we'll use our tangent formula this time, so it's going to be plus or minus the square root of 1 minus cosine 210 over 1 plus cosine of 210. When I plug in my value there, I end up with square root of 1 minus negative root 3 over 2 all over 1 plus negative root 3 over 2. When I simplify my signs there, plus or minus, 1 plus square root of 3 over 2 over 1 minus the square root of 3 over 2. Because I'm in quadrant 2, my final answer should be negative this time. And if I do my simplification trick, it's going to be 2 plus root 3 over 2 minus root 3 as kind of the simplest version of this answer. Okay, so basically using 210 and what I know about 210, I could figure out the sine, the cosine, and the tangent of half of that angle. Alright, you guys give it a try. 112.5 seems like a strange angle, but the trick here is to think about what that is half of. Alright, see if you can find the sine of 112.5. By saying exact value, you're expected not to use your calculator. Okay, for this one we need to think about 112 as simply half of 225. 225 is kind of one of our special angles. This one's going to be in the third quadrant. We should know our sine and cosine values there. Using the formula, I've got to evaluate the cosine of 225, which is negative root 2 over 2. And when I simplify that down, I end up with the final answer of positive square root of 2 plus root 2 over 4. My answer is positive because my original angle, which is the half angle, is located in the second quadrant, and since I'm dealing with the sine function, I should have a positive answer in the second quadrant.